Middlesbrough have been dealt some horrible injury news with regards to Ben Doak. The update isn't good news for Middlesbrough supporters, but has the Liverpool starlet played his last match for Middlesbrough? Welcome to Bonkers For Boro.
Stewie Downing then. Downing running beyond the fullback. Whips a great looking ball in. Header. Goal! Massimo Macaroni! Massimo Macaroni! Macaroni's header! And Boro have struck a stick to the heart of Dracula's boys! And it could be Eindhoven time!
Welcome back to Bonkers For Boro, and in this episode, unfortunately, there's not any good news to be sharing with you. We're going to be talking about this man, Ben Doak, the player who has been one of Middlesbrough's standout stars over the course of this campaign. He arrived at the club on loan from Liverpool last summer. And in the first half of the season, the hope for him really was that he was going to come and be a first-team player and challenge Izzy Jones for that spot on the right wing. But since establishing himself in the first team, it's just been absolutely unplayable. Really established himself as not only one of Middlesbrough's most dangerous players, but one of the best players in the Championship and one of Britain's most talented young players. There was a huge amount of fanfare for him during the autumn months, given his performances for Middlesbrough and for Scotland as well. And the real hope was that he was going to be able to kick on in the second half of the season, but that doesn't look like it's going to be happening. That's because, according to reports from the Northern Echo, Ben Doak has undergone surgery on the injury that's kept him ruled out over the last few weeks. Now, while Middlesbrough sources, according to the report, aren't ruling out the prospect of Ben Doak returning to action for Middlesbrough before the end of the season, it does seem unlikely, with Ben Doak now returning to Liverpool's training ground to continue his rehabilitation with the Reds. So it's really not very good news for Middlesbrough. I think a lot of Middlesbrough supporters had been hoping that Ben Doak would return to action in the next couple of weeks. That was certainly what was kind of suggested, that he may not be too far away, that his injury problem might not be too severe. But it does seem now that the issue is more severe than what we first thought, and that it could actually prove to be a season-ending injury. Now, at the time of recording, Middlesbrough have got 11 regular season games left to play. Obviously, there's the potential for an additional 3 games if Middlesbrough were to get into the playoff places, but it does sort of feel that with this injury, given that he's just had surgery, that if he was to come back before the end of the season, he may only come back for the last couple of games. The last game, we don't exactly know what the timescale would sort of be with that. And for Middlesbrough, that's a real problem, because obviously he's a lone player. He's someone who, given the natural talent that he's got and the fact that he's contracted to Liverpool, it does seem like he's someone who's going to be playing at a higher sort of level next season. You'd be very surprised if he's not playing in the Premier League, whether that's for Liverpool or for someone else in the Premier League who might take him on loan. So for Middlesbrough, it does seem like he may potentially have played his last game for the club, or one of his last games, because should Middlesbrough not be in that race for the playoffs, which is a completely different conversation, I realise, should they not be in that battle, Middlesbrough may choose to focus more on the players that are contracted to the club, giving people like Morgan Whittaker more game time, people like Sonny Finch, Marcus Force, he's in there and he's building up his fitness at the moment. So it's certainly a real problem for Middlesbrough, and one which for supporters will go down as a real blow, with a lot of fans really, really keen to see more of Ben Doak before the end of this season. Now, you only have to look at this slide to see just how influential Ben Doak has been. We spoke about the fact that he's a right winger. For those who have been living under a rock this season, his pace, his tenacity, his fearlessness, getting at his fullback, have been absolutely essential to Middlesbrough's results in the first half of the season. And you can see here he's played 24 times for Middlesbrough in the Championship this season. He scored 3 goals, provided 7 assists along the way. A lot of those numbers came in those last few weeks before he got injured. He was really, really starting to not just contribute good performances, which he was doing all the way through that first half of the season, but he was also really starting to add that sort of end product to his game as well. He was getting into those dangerous positions in the box, usually self-made as well. He was usually able to get on the ball and take on the fullback and get into the penalty area, get to the byline and cut it back for Emmanuel Latilath or for Finn Azaz to convert. But he was also getting into those positions himself to cut in on his left foot and slot the ball home as well. So yeah, it was a really, really impressive first half of the season. The hope was, given those numbers and just how encouraging they were, that he was going to be able to really kick on in the second half of the season and get well into double figures in terms of assists. And maybe even push towards double figures in terms of goals as well. But obviously his injury has scuppered that somewhat. Obviously Middlesbrough's poor run of form as well, it kind of coincided with Ben Doak's injury as well, to be honest. So obviously you can't say that those results, those poor results were down to Ben Doak not being available. But undoubtedly, it must have had an impact because he really was Middlesbrough's standout player in that first half of the season. He was someone where, if opposition players were able to sort of nullify his threat, then it would go a long way to nullify Middlesbrough's overall threat as well. So it was a really disappointing time for him to get injured. The hope for Middlesbrough fans was that he would come back for the last couple of months of the season at least, to really sort of spearhead Middlesbrough's charge to try and get back into the playoffs. Obviously, Middlesbrough's results have turned for the positive in the last week or so, and the hope was that Ben Doak would come back and he would really just add an extra dimension to Middlesbrough's attack as they look to sort of sneak into the top six in the end by the end of the season. But it does remain to be seen whether that's going to happen. So I think if we're looking at Ben Doak and his loan spell, I think the question that Middlesbrough fans are really asking is, has he played his last match for the club? And you have to say that it does seem quite likely. I think Middlesbrough aren't going to want to force him back too early from injury, particularly given that it's touch and go whether he'll be fit for the end of the season anyway. Liverpool, obviously, they've got a slightly longer term investment in Ben Doak. They're not going to want to do anything that's going to jeopardise his long-term fitness prospects. They're going to want him fit and firing and ready to go for pre-season. You'd imagine that he will be with Liverpool's first team squad during pre-season at least, challenging for a place in Arnie Slot's side and hopefully challenging for a place in that first team setup in the Premier League next season. If that doesn't happen, you would still expect that he would be amongst the Liverpool's first team in pre-season, but then potentially heading out on loan for the campaign. I know obviously there was a lot of interest in the January transfer window from the likes of Crystal Palace, and I think it was Ipswich who were also keen on taking him on loan as well. So you'd imagine that the similar sort of interest will be there in the summer. And that means that Liverpool will be very keen to make sure that he is available and fit and sharp, ready to go for the start of next season. They're not going to want to rush him back for the back end of this season, particularly if Middlesbrough's playoffs hopes are hanging by a thread. They're not going to want to do anything too risky with Ben Doak and getting back in the mix. And for Middlesbrough, it does really feel like Ben Doak isn't going to be in the Championship next season. I don't think that's a particularly bullish statement to make. He's been so good during the first half of the season with Middlesbrough that with so much Premier League interest, it's almost inevitable that he'll be playing in the Premier League next season or in one of Europe's top divisions. Potentially he could head out on loan to Germany or somewhere like that in the Bundesliga. But for Middlesbrough, it does really feel like these next couple of months are going to be the last opportunities for Middlesbrough to see Ben Doak in the red and white of Middlesbrough. They will be hoping that he'll be fit. They'll be hoping that his rehab goes well with Liverpool and that he can force his way back to action. We know what Ben Doak's like as a character as well. He's not someone who will want to sit with his feet up for the back end of the season. He'll be absolutely gutted if his Middlesbrough campaign and his Middlesbrough career most likely ends in this way, having been ruled out for much of the second half of the season. So he'll be desperate to be involved for Middlesbrough in whatever way he can, whether Middlesbrough are challenging for the playoffs or whether it's just kind of seeing out the other season in a positive sort of way. He'll be very, very keen to be involved, but it does remain to be seen whether he'll be fit. My prediction would probably be that with no gambles likely to be taking place, that he probably won't feature for Middlesbrough again, which means that I believe that he probably has played his last game for Middlesbrough. But yeah, fingers crossed he does come back fit. Fingers crossed Middlesbrough are still in the running for the playoffs, because he could, even if he's only half fit and he's only able to be used as an impact sub, he could play a really, really big part for Middlesbrough should we still be in that hunt for the top six. So I want to hear from you on this one. Obviously, it's really disappointing news with regards to Ben Doak, and obviously Middlesbrough supporters are gutted on social media that, that this injury has potentially ended his season and ended his loan spell with Middlesbrough. But do you think that Ben Doak has played his final match for Middlesbrough? That's what I want to hear from you. So drop into the comments below. Let me know what you think. And if you have enjoyed this video, please do hit like, please do hit subscribe. There's a lot more videos coming, and I will catch up with you next time, hopefully with some slightly better news than this video.